There's only 3 things you actually have to master to be a successful freelancer making multiple 6 figures. The first one is your perspective. The second one is your clients. And the third one, well, you'll just have to stick around and watch the video to find out. I've been freelancing on and off for about 16 years, and I've spent the last 5 years running a full-time solo agency, aka freelancing, and making multiple 6 figures doing that. And I've learned a lot of lessons, a lot of mistakes I've made, and a lot of things I've figured out along the road. I'm going to condense that for you right now, and we're going to start with something. Before we get to clients and the mystery topic, we need to talk about the mindset shift or the perspective shift that you need to make to be a successful freelancer. And that might sound like a lot of hocus pocus, a lot of online guru nonsense, but it's actually true. If you don't make these perspective shifts, the rest of the stuff I talked to you about in this video, it's not going to make any sense. So let's start by breaking this perspective shift into 2 parts. Part number 1 is that you need to focus on outcomes and not services. And this might be a new concept for you because maybe you make logos, or maybe you build websites, maybe you write copy, and you tend to think of yourself as a service provider. You need to stop doing that right away and start thinking of yourself as a solution provider. Because when someone hires you, it's because they're trying to solve a problem. And the goal of working with you as a service provider is to find the solution, is to fix their problem. And so nobody wants to pay for a service. They want to pay for an outcome. They want to pay for some sort of benefit. And so often people ask me, how much should I charge for a website? The answer is a website's worth or value could sometimes be $0 and sometimes it's worth $100,000. It depends on the size of the problem that you're solving. But unless you have that perspective, you're going to find some weird random number that you pulled out of the ether, like $2,000 for a website or $500 for a logo. Well, why is that? We could actually have clients that pay $20 for a logo and still be upset because at the end of the day, it didn't solve their problem. But you might actually land a client that pays you $20,000 for a logo and they loved paying that $20,000 to you. They would do it no problem again, and they would recommend to other people to do it because it highly solved their problem. And so a couple of things here. If a business, for instance, hires you to write copy for their sales page copy, they're not paying you for words. They can go to ChatGPT for that. They can go Google something. They could just, hire somebody on Fiverr for that. Why would they hire you? Not for the words themselves, not because you use a specific platform like Google Docs or Notion. It's because you're able to solve their problem and you have some sort of track record or history of solving that type of problem. So when you write copy for a sales page, what you're trying to do is increase sales. So therefore, our perspective needs to shift. We need to stop talking about the words, stop talking about the process, and start talking about the outcome. So we need to speak to the client about that outcome. We need to ask them questions about what they want that outcome to be. What's their current outcome? And what would they like their outcome, the vision of what they want? Is it going from $50,000 of revenue a year to 60? Well, then how much can I charge them for a website? Maybe the difference there, maybe 10 grand. Maybe that's what it's worth. Maybe it's worth less. Maybe it's worth more. But at the end of the day, it's talking about the outcomes that's going to help you. So stop focusing on how you're going to do it, the platform you're going to do it. At the end of the day, clients don't care whether it's WordPress, Framer, Webflow, or any of the other platforms to build websites. They want that website to do something for them. And if you can't figure out what that something is, well, then you're going to be stuck not being a successful freelancer. The second thing we need to talk about when it comes to your mindset shift is you need to think about your work as an investment. And there's a few things that are going to go on in this thought process. It's important to understand the real core reasons why someone would want to hire you, that choose to pay you their hard-earned money. And really, at the end of the day, there's really only 3 reasons why somebody's going to pay you money to do your service or your thing for them. Number 1, they want more customers or clients. Number 2, they want to increase their profit. Or number 3, they want to feed their vanity. And you know what? It's okay for people to pay you to feed their vanity. It's okay to pay you for all of those things, but those are really the only 3 that you're ever going to find. So if somebody comes to you and says, I'm looking for a new logo, and you ask them why, and they say, because apparently I'm supposed to have one, that's a bad reason. That's not a problem to solve. Or if it is, it's a very, very cheap problem to solve. And they can go to Fiverr for that. They can go to 99 Designs for that. They could have Canva do it for them. So really, most of the time, client work comes from a place of believing that the work that you do will result in more of one of those things for them, X, Y, or Z. It has to produce more of that thing for your services to be valuable. So you need to figure out what the motivation is of every client that you work with. Little pro tip for you. Instead of figuring out the motivation individually for every new client, figure out who's your perfect type of client, what types of problems you love to solve and are good at solving, and then keep solving those same problems for that same type of client over and over and over. You get better at it, you get faster at it, you get paid more for it, and you become an expert in that area. This is called niching down. We'll do whole other videos on this. But you need to figure out what the problem is that you need to solve, because quite often freelancers are trying to talk about price, they're trying to talk about service, they're trying to talk about platform. So let's recap what we've talked about in this chapter of this mini freelance course. Number one, you are selling solutions and you're selling outcomes. You are not selling services. So stop talking about it, stop focusing on it, and start focusing on the problem that you're solving. Number two, hiring you is an investment in that outcome. It's not just a cost. And when we think about investments, we think about it like the stock market. I put money in expecting to get greater results or dividends later. And so start thinking about your work like an investment, and think like this, and your customers will feel more confident, and you understand the business and can help them improve their business. This is going to change everything else that we're about to talk about. It's going to change everything in your freelance business. Let's talk about the bread and butter of your freelance business, and that's your clients, the people that are hopefully going to pay you for all those wonderful solutions. The thing that constantly plagues people, and the question I get all the time is, how do I find clients? And if you have that traditional way of thinking about finding clients, I need to go out and get them. That means that you are hoping that you can happen to identify somebody who is broadcasting their need for a service like the one that you provide, like the one that you offer. And in the case of identifying somebody who's broadcasting their needs, you're going to run into a bunch of different problems. If the prospect is publicly announcing this, well, then you can imagine that the sharks are already circling. The waters have been chummed. If they posted it on a job board, hundreds of people are already attacking that. If they've posted this, in a Facebook page or somewhere else, hundreds of people are already attacking it. Doesn't matter where it's happening. If they're already speaking about it, there's at least a handful or more people who have already beat you to it. They're already speaking back. And this is just really noisy. It's a really loud space. And you're trying to now compete in this loud, competitive space. People all yelling and screaming, pick me, I'm the one you want to go with. And now all of a sudden the client's going, well, why? Why should I pick you? Prove to me why I should pick you. And quite often, this is the race to the bottom where people have a really hard time differentiating themselves. So the only way left to differentiate yourself, since everybody probably does good work, everyone has a decent dribble portfolio or online portfolio, the only way to differentiate yourself is the cheapest price, and that becomes a race to the bottom and your path to constant Fiverr work, where you are never going to be a thriving freelance, independent, solo business owner. And so instead of doing that, instead of finding clients and competing with hundreds of other people for those potentials, I would actually recommend a different avenue at using the perspective shifts and change that we talked about before, and that is to create your own client, because creating your own clients puts you in the driver's seat. And the truth is, everybody has problems, and there's lots of people out there that have problems, and there's a lot of people out there that don't yet recognize or realize what the problem is. And this is why it's so important to figure out your perfect type of client, like we spoke about in the previous section, and start solving that type of problem for that type of client over and over and over, because then you start to recognize who your potential clients are that haven't recognized it themselves, that they need your help. They need a solution. They don't recognize the problem, and you're the person that's going to point out the problem and be waiting right there for them to say, hey, look at me, I'm the solution. And this is the idea of creating clients. And so what we want to do is we want to put ourselves in the places and spaces, both online and offline, so we can be around these types of people, this perfect client of ours who haven't yet recognized what the issue actually is. Quite often people are just thinking they need a website, but that's maybe not the actual problem. The actual problem is that they don't have copy. And so if you're a copywriter, you can swoop into these conversations and ask some good questions. Maybe they think they need a website, but they don't need a website. They just need a better Facebook page, some branding, and maybe some social media. If you're a branding or social media person, you can beat everybody else to the punch simply by getting into those places and spaces, online and offline, starting conversations. And when you start these conversations, you want them to be casual conversations where you are investing in them, where you're interested in them instead of just interested in selling your services. You might start conversations with people in subreddits and Facebook groups and forums, or in some sort of business group or a meetup in your local town, and start asking people questions like, hey, how are things going with your business? And what are you really excited about right now? What's really difficult for you? What are you having trouble? What ceilings are you struggling breaking through as a business right now? And through this type of natural conversation, the person that you're talking with will often begin to explain their priorities. They'll say things like, well, we're trying to finish staffing everything out, but we just can't get enough people through the door. Nobody knows about us. Nobody's hearing about us online. They're starting to tell you what the problem is. And now we can respond and say, oh, you're right. You probably do need help getting some more visibility online. And that's where you can insert yourself and say, hey, I actually do that. I help people with that. Now, if you don't help people with that specific problem, then tell them. Be honest with them. Hey, I couldn't help you with that. I do these other things, but maybe I could refer you to somebody and be helpful to you in that way. But if it happens to be the thing you do, man, you have just beat the crowd. There is no chum in the waters. There's no other sharks in the ocean for miles around. It's just you and your potential client. And it feels serendipitous. It feels amazing to potential clients when you create them as a client because you've found their need and you've identified it through this natural conversation. And quite often, they'll be excited. They'll say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that we were here in this conversation, whether it's online or offline. I would love to engage your services. I would love to follow up in a private conversation. And you don't want to have these conversations or follow-up conversations in public. You want to have them in private. So if you meet them in a forum or you meet them at an event out in town somewhere, have a follow-up call with them later. Get them very excited by asking them lots of questions. And I'm going to be really honest, not every one of these conversations is going to lead to a paying client, but it's going to be an investment in an ongoing process where you do something called biz dev, just business development. This is part of what you do as a freelancer, is go out and not find, but create clients and start to actually build this network. And the problem is that, like any net, people fall through your network at times, and that's okay. But you're going to start building some momentum and putting yourself in those places and spaces. And finding clients is so much more difficult than it is to actually create clients. Now, once you've established a name for yourself, you've been doing it for a really long time, people will start to come to you. You'll be a well-known source of information or solution. Then yes, you might become kind of a name brand and they'll come to you. But if you don't have those years and years of experience or the money to use to pay for advertising and marketing, you're going to have to lean on this creating clients method. And it's going to go really well for you, especially if you've shifted your perspective to see the value in it. And now comes the mystery topic, which is actually the most important topic of the day, and that is money. That's pricing. How do you price yourself? How much should you charge for these services, aka solutions? And are you ready? Have you put the thought work in so that you actually know that answer? You would not have been ready for this conversation had you not addressed your mindset and the way that you find or make your clients. Now we can talk about money, because once you've found those clients, they're going to ask you, hey, how much does it cost? And the first thing we need to talk about is your response, because quite often freelancers don't have that thought or that number in their head. They haven't put in the thought work. So they just word vomit something out, usually out of fear because they don't want to lose the client. So they undervalue themselves. Somebody says to you, how much for a logo? And I don't know, it's $300. Does that sound good to you? Because you haven't put in the thought work. So first thing we need to do is breathe. And we need to control our word vomit. Make sure we don't just spit things out that we haven't thought of. Number two, you need to put in the thought work and figure out how much you're actually worth. What are the solutions that you can bring to the table worth? And sometimes we have to look at those objectively, or even ask other people to look at those objectively for us, because some solutions are worth more than others. If I can help a company make $100,000 next year that they weren't able to make before, that's worth a lot of money. But if I can help a company make maybe $200, then that solution's not very good. And I either have to put that thought work in, I might even need to change the types of solutions that I am there for, that I provide, that I can offer, or I might need to do a combination of all of the above. And so make sure you put that thought work in so you can control your word vomit so that you don't panic and spit things out. There aren't a lot of hard and fast rules, but there are a couple of recommendations that I would offer you when it comes to finding your bracket or finding your ballpark area on what you should charge, because you should have some sort of minimum level of engagement or ballpark that you work in. I don't do $200,000 websites. I just don't want any of that process. I don't want to work with those types of clients. I've done it before and I'm not interested. But I also don't want to work with $1,000 clients for a website. It's not my thing. So you need to figure out who it is that you want to work with. And there's a couple of things that will help you do that. Number one, you need to understand that whatever you do as a freelancer is most likely a specialty skill. Copywriting, branding, identity, websites, mobile app development, doesn't matter what it is. If you're freelancing, you are a specialist, and specialists usually get paid pretty well. Number two, you need to think about what your average cost of living is. And I'm not telling you you need to go out and say, it's time to start freelancing, I need to buy a gold toilet. Or the other way, I'm starting to freelance, I got to live on rice and beans. What is a comfortable living for you? And it might depend on where you live and what your life stage and situation is. It's going to be very different for a 22-year-old who's living in San Diego, California versus a 42-year-old with 6 kids living in the Philippines. These are going to be very different prices and average costs of living, but you need to take that average cost of living and divide it across the year. That's how much you need to make every month. So maybe for you to live comfortably, it's $120,000 a year. Divide that by 12 for the months in the year. That is $10,000 a month. Are you going to make that $10,000 a month? Is it going to be one website for $10,000? I don't know. Maybe. Can you solve that type of problem? If not, maybe it's 10 websites for $1,000. A good way to do it. Maybe you can whip those out in 2 days and you'll make a really good living and hit your target goal. These are ways to kind of reverse engineer your budget, your operating costs for your business, and without getting into extreme finance advice, probably some of the simplest hard, fast rules that you're going to find. But one of the biggest things we need to talk about most likely is your model of pricing. And really, I only recommend 2 models of pricing. And the first model of pricing is very, very famous, and you've probably heard of it before. If you haven't, it's called value-based pricing. What you don't want to do is bill hourly for things. You don't want to say, hey, I charge $50 an hour, and I want to charge you 100 hours. That is not a good way. It actually robs you and it punishes you as the freelancer if you work fast. And it actually can frustrate your client if you work slow. So you don't want to put yourself in that situation. On the other side of things, you might want to do something called value-based pricing. We are basing the investment that the client will put into the project or into you based on the diagnostic questions we ask, and we figured out what their problem is and what type of outcome this project will have for them. So this is back to some of those questions we ask. What is your problem? What are you struggling with? What's the ceiling you can't get through as a business? And if they tell you they're making 10 grand this year and they're trying to get to 100 grand, that's a $90,000 gap that they're asking you to fill or make up. It's definitely worth more than $500 for you to fix that problem. And so value-based pricing doesn't punish you if you are fast, and it doesn't frustrate the client. Instead, it sets the tone. And you know, if you can solve these types of problems, you work within that ballpark range. And it's important to speak often and early about that ballpark range. I have a minimum level of engagement when somebody comes to work with me. I won't do projects any less than 20 to 25 grand. And when I look at projects, I usually know the types of problems that I'm good at solving. Those are somewhere in the 20 to 35 grand range. I'm very comfortable with that. I do a lot of that type of work. And because of that, I'm going to talk about that pretty early on. I'm going to look at their problem. I'm going to ask them a bunch of questions, and I'm going to really quickly say, hey, I'm kind of hearing what you're saying. And I usually have solved problems like this and built solutions like this for somewhere between X and Y type of price or ballpark range. You want to get that in there early because you don't want a client waiting around for hours to talk to you only to find out that you are way out of their price range or way under their price range. So talk about it early. Value-based pricing takes a lot of practice, takes a lot of confidence, and requires that you learn how to ask some insightful questions. Thankfully, I have a bunch of resources for that. So you can look down in the description of this video. It'll lead you to some client surveys, some questionnaires that'll give you some really valuable questions to ask if you're interested in that. Now, the other model of pricing that I recommend is very specific, and I found that it works very, very well for me. And this is the monthly retainer or the subscription model the pricing model for design. And the subscription model has blown up recently with a lot of talk online where we're kind of becoming the Netflix of design. A lot of people think that cheapens the process, but really it's just an evolution of what we call the retainer model. Now, this is where, and the only time that I would encourage you or really allow you through my advice to bill in an hourly way. And so it's going to be selling a block of hours. And though you're not selling them hour by hour, you're selling a block of hours, 30 hours, 60 hours, 100 hours, and you are charging an hourly rate for those. The only reason I suggest this is because it works very, very well for certain types of design. And really the only type of design it works well for is digital product design, software design. So we're talking about web apps, mobile applications. Those are the areas where this works really, really well because it's hard to actually put some sort of value-based number on certain types of digital product design. Because a lot of times there's a big question mark in the startup world, in the entrepreneur kind of world, when people are trying to figure out, launch something new, they got some investment and funding, they're not really sure if it's going to go somewhere. It's hard for you to put a number on it because so much of it is dependent on them and the way that they pitch, the way that they raise funds, the way that they market. And so instead, it can be very, very helpful if you're building software, mobile apps, and web apps to actually book monthly retainers. It's use it or lose it type of hours, or put them on a design subscription where they can submit tasks 1 or 2 at a time, and you work on those tasks until they're satisfied with them. Those models can work well specifically for digital product design, but for pretty much everything else, it's value-based pricing. And so those are my recommendations for pricing. A couple of other tips is to always have some sort of upsell and a downsell ready and available for your clients. So maybe you pitch them a website for 10 grand and they say that is way too much. You're going to have some sort of downsell for them, a cheaper price. That does not mean you just lower the price and do the same amount of work. It means you have a budget-friendly option for them to jump to in case your price was too high. Likewise, you want to have an upsell. If they say, I would love to do that, I would love to spend that 10 grand on you, no problem. This is a no-brainer. And they jump to that offer very, very quickly. You probably want to have some sort of upsell, like some social media, maybe some content writing, SEO, some other things you can layer on top of it to make it an even more attractive offer. And if they want, they can pull some of those a la carte options. Last things we will talk about are just a few tips and tricks that I've found helpful in my freelancing career, starting with number 1, which is to automate as many processes as possible. Use Zapier, use Make, use as many things as you possibly can to automate processes, manual, laborious processes that you shouldn't have to do yourself. Try to automate them if you can. Number 2, document your processes as you go, because if you do move away from a solo agency or solo freelance entrepreneur of some sort, and all of a sudden you have employees, it's going to be nice to have things documented the way that you do them, the way that they work well. It's going to work well for others. You can just hand them the plays from your playbook. Number 3, limit the amount of tools that you use. Figure out those narrow slice of clients and solutions, and then model the tools and all those things that you use to that, because you don't want to have really high overhead or cost of operating your business. So try to limit the amount of tools, subscriptions, and costs that you have. Number 3, figure out a schedule. When you're working freelance, a lot of times it's up to you. You can sleep in if you want. You can go to bed late if you want, but it's nice to have a schedule that you adhere to. It's only going to help you run your business more effectively. Number 5, create a schedule that includes off hours. Really, this means prioritize family time, personal time, refresh time. You got to have that as well. Yes, when you're running your own business, it's probably hard, and you probably do have to work quite often, late hours, long hours, or more than you would work with a normal 9 to 5, but you still have to schedule time so that you have your sanity and your health. Number 6, there is a difference between a maker and a manager. And if you are running your own business and you're also the person doing all the creative work, you have to learn how to bucket and separate all of that managerial, administrative, client stuff, emails, Slack messages, and make sure you still block out time to be a maker, to be a creative. If you don't do that, you're going to task switch, context switch way too much. You're not going to get enough done. And lastly, create a network around you and start growing your offering. So maybe you do branding and logo design. You're going to need somebody in your network that does web design, maybe mobile app design, maybe graphic design. So you might want to build that network of creatives that you can refer to, and then you can bring them into projects and charge an upsell or a fee on top of their services to bring the whole package together for your clients. And that's it. That's what pricing looks like, and that's some tips and tricks. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Woo! That was a lot of freelance advice, and if you made it all the way to the end of this video, good for you. I'm really hoping good things for your business. And if you wouldn't mind, leave a thumbs up on this video, like it, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you know when more freelance videos like this one come out. I hope you're having an amazing week. I hope you're designing amazing things, making amazing things, and crushing it in your freelance business.